Okay. So, now in retrospect, what do you think could have been done beside the homecoming election incident? What do you think could have been done to make you stay at TCU better?
Hmm. I think having more black students would have helped
Mm.
because that sense of community just was not there.
Mm.
There were so few of us. We found ways to do things together, and of course, the Black Student Caucus was a way to do it. The gospel choir was a way to do it. In fact, I don't know if you know, but while we were here, we were the choir that recruited Kirk Franklin. You know about this.
Yes.
Because Ron Shirey, who I knew well because I was in the concert chorale, and also sang in, well, I made the jazz ensemble, but I quit. I'll tell you about that too. He didn't believe that gospel was a real musical discipline.
Mm.
He said it was, to me, savage and uncivilized. And he told me, you can sing in Latin. Why do you want to do that? And I said, it's my culture and it's my faith. I said, I don't understand why you wouldn't want me to do both. So he was trying to dissuade me from being in the gospel choir because he felt like it was uncivilized, savage.
Wow.
Rest his soul. And so he didn't put any support resources behind the gospel choir. We were on our own as students.
Mm-hmm.
And Shonda Jones, who was the president of, and she is at another school right now as a dean or something like that. I mean, she's pretty high up, but she's a pastor. Mm-hmm. We're connected on Instagram. She would talk for days, by the way. She went to Church of Philadelphia. Several of the students went there, and they went there on Sundays because it was nearby, and discovered this little man who was willing to come and direct our choir. Now, what's interesting is we fired him too. I don't know if you know that. Do you know the story? We had to fire him.
Okay, can we talk about
We can talk about this. We fired Kirk Franklin before we knew he was Kirk Franklin.
Oh my!
I think if we knew he was Kirk Franklin, we'd still fire him because what he would do. Now, mind you, we're already feeling like stepchildren because the music department wouldn't help us out. And sometimes we would get on the docket for chapel service. And so we would feel very self-conscious going in there knowing that Ron Shirey was over there with his concert chorale or whatever group he was with. And we didn't have anybody to play the piano or anything like that. Sometimes had to go in and sing a cappella and face this sea of white people, and try and sound the best we could.
I mean, what do you want to do? Stomp?
Right, right. So Kirk seemed to be the answer to that.
Yeah. And
he taught us some great songs. And I don't know if you know if Gospel Word of Truth, which was the name of the gospel choir, was multicultural. It wasn't just black kids. Oh. We had white kids. We had Hispanic kids. Anybody who wanted to sing gospel, come on, right? And so Kurt would come and rehearse with us. I forgot when rehearsal was, Thursday night, something like that. And over in the lobby at Shirley Hall, he would meet us there. And we'd line up and he'd play and he'd teach us a song, get us all ready, and not show up the day it was time to perform. Ooh. So here we were, standing in front of sea white folks. And Ron Shirey over here with his nose in the air.
Already thinking this is savagery.
Right. Nobody to play for us, nobody to direct us, and we just said, you know what? We just have to go for it. A one, a two. And we would sing a cappella and bring the house down. And so we're like, yay! But we're like, that dude, like, why did he do that?
Yeah.
He show up to rehearsal the next time, dropping names. I'm so sorry I didn't make it. B.B. Winans called, and I had to answer the call, and Mississippi Mass needed me. So, he was dropping these names, and we're sitting up there like, this guy is really doing this? And I've run into Kirk since then, by the way. He knows. We know, right? And so he did it one too many times. And Shonda came to rehearsal one night and said, we had to get rid of him. We were like, yes! Now, what's interesting, he taught us a song. It was called Joy. And the words went, joy, joy, God's great joy. Joy, joy, down in my soul. Sweet, beautiful, soul-saving joy. Are you recognizing the song? It's from the soundtrack of The Preacher's Wife, which hadn't even been recorded yet. Yeah. But he taught that to the Gospel Word of Truth. Isn't that crazy? Showed up on The Preacher's Wife. CD, and Mississippi Mass sings that behind the late Whitney Houston. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
But yeah, we fired Kirk Franklin.
You fired him.
And we'll do it again. But that, that's really my experience at TCU. The small little tight-knit community that we had, moving in between BSC, the sorority meetings, and we knew not to show up on the Greek after a certain hour. Of course, we didn't have a house down there.
Right.
But sometimes there was some need to go down there, whatever it might be. But you didn't want to be caught after dark. Because we'd heard the stories of people who look like us, especially the girls, more than catcall, but, things happening to them, assault and that kind of thing too. So I remember one time being on the Greek. I don't know why we were on the Greek. And the sun was going down, and we were so scared. And someone did shout out the window at us, but they didn't say anything bad, but we were really afraid. So that was part of the experience too.
Now, I know you were involved in the whole battle to get MLK Day recognized as an official holiday here on campus. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, so BSC meetings again. We were wondering why we didn't have it. And, diversity wasn't really even a term that people used back then.
Right.
It just wasn't a thing. But we knew that there are certain things that we should be getting. Now, mind you, I mentioned Cosby in a Different World. We're coming on every Thursday night. So we would see this experience going on at this, made-up black university or college. And we would also see the T-shirts and things that they would wear. They were wearing Free South Africa T-shirts, right? Free Mandela T-shirts, bold, black, and beautiful type of T-shirts. And we were getting all sorts of pride. And we're thinking, what can we do with this little school? And one of the things we thought that should have been done was MLK Day. And we just among ourselves, why don't we have it?
I mean, all of the universities have it.
Yeah. And, I remember, colleagues of mine, other students at other universities, they had the day off. Why couldn't we? So we said, well, what can we do about it? And we thought about it and thought about it. And I was like, well, the one card that we hold, our brothers are on that football team. And that's a whole lot of money.
It's leverage, yes.
And I raised the idea. I said, what if they walked off during a game? And it got dead silent. They're like, oh, no, They would get us like, they would never do that. They would never do that. Big debate went on about that. And I said, okay, what if we bluff them? We have them walk off of, practice and see what they do with the threat that they will walk off from the game on Saturday. And they agreed it's worth a try. I was like, well, how do we get in contact? Like, how do we start talking to them? Because, again, they had a totally different schedule than us. It was hard to catch them. If they were on campus, they were moving. They were going somewhere, going to practice, going to the training table, doing something. I don't know how we got some of them to actually come to a meeting one night. But there were at least a couple of the ones that could, lead and make a decision and take it back to the group. I can't even remember who they were. But I remember them, when we told them the idea, they kind of sat back like, you want us to do what? It took some real cajoling and convincing. And we're like, look, just practice. That's all. All you got to do is just start walking. And just come up, in front of Moncrief, down the side in front of, what was the name of the guy's dorm? Pete Wright. And then come in front of Frog Fountain. We will be there to meet you. And we will hold hands together. The skiff will be there and everything. And I never will forget the night that we're supposed to do that. We were waiting. And we were, you could kind of see right where Frog Fountain was, there's kind of a crest, So you could kind of see people walking up from Stadium Drive. You would see their heads first and then their feet, right? And we waited and we waited. And then we turned around and saw Jim Wacker first. And he was holding hands with the guys like this. Now, say what you will about Jim. He did not win football games, but that was a good man. And the reason why he was there was because the boys were scared. And instead of just walking off campus, one of them broke, and he said, I'm just gonna tell Coach Wacker what we want to do and see what he says. And that's what they did. They said, Coach Wacker, this is what we want to do, and we're scared, and we know you probably won't like it. And he said, no, I'm with you. And they came up the hill. We saw Coach Wacker. We saw the guys, and they were, arm in arm, like, we shall overcome. They weren't singing, but that's how they were. And the skiff was there to get the shot. And I was like, yes, We were so excited. But again, we didn't know what would need to happen in the background for the dots to be connected and all of that. And I do believe that Shonda was probably the one that did a lot of that brokering, because I think she might have been the president of the student caucus too. I can't remember who it was. But it took the caucus and the gospel word of truth and whoever we could cobble together, the sorors and the frat brothers, and there you go. And we got the next MLK Day. I don't know how much time went between, but it was the same year. It happened.
Wow.
And I stand in front of my students, and that's the first holiday right out of the gate. The semester starts and they're off the next Monday. And I want to tell them, some of us had something to do with that.
Yes.
That y'all take us so for granted.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, when you were a columnist at the Skiff, is there any particular story, besides the ones that you have already mentioned, that struck or impacted you in particular?
There were a couple columns that got a lot of attention. One had to do with a poster, and again, it had to do with the athletes. And on the poster, they had two student athletes. One was white, one was black. The white guy on the poster had a school book or a diploma or something like that. And the black athlete was in the back with the football, just like that. And we're like, no, this is not going to work. And again, these were the conversations that came up in Black Student Caucus. And I said, I'll write the column. That's the best I can do. I'll give you the platform. But we've got to do something. And I can't remember what kind of civil disobedience we did, but we thought we had a little civil rights movement going on in the 90s, right?
The beauty of youth.
Right, at TCU of all places. And at the same time, I had friends at Morehouse and Spelman. There was a dragging that happened in, it was a town, begins with an F. I forgot, near Atlanta. There was a dragging that happened. And they were like literally walking from the AUC to the Capitol building, to protest that stuff. And I mean, that was serious. And here we were, we got a poster. But, it's what we thought we were called to do. Ultimately, we got the poster pulled down. But that was one of the columns that got some backlash from people that were like, oh, come on. Really?
Stop complaining.
Stop complaining.
Yeah.
I mean, it just so happens to me the white guy has the diploma and the black guy has the football. What do you want us to do? Switch it? We're like, yeah, why not? So, yeah, that's one that I can recall off the top of my head.
And the racism, so clearly, microaggressions were common practice, even back in the 90s. Do you think that the racism was one-sided? And let me clarify that. Do you, based on your experience, do you think that African American students were intentional about integration, or did they tend to separate themselves?
That's a layered question. Because if you don't feel a part, if you don't feel included, where are you going to go? And the other thing about it is, we stick out. Maybe I don't stick out as much as the next person, right? But together, we stick out. And I remember someone asked me, why do y'all congregate outside the main? And what they were talking about, the football players and some of the basketball players would all sit right outside the main cafeteria, which was in Brown Lupton. There were some stairs that went upstairs to some of the student life offices and things like that. And they sit there between classes. And the girls didn't like it because it was like you walked by and you were getting checked out, you know. But we never had a problem with our brothers sitting there. And when we would go into the cafeteria, maybe 2 or 3 of us would sit together, but you wouldn't see like all of us sitting together. But still, I was getting the question, why do you congregate? And I asked them, why do you congregate? And they were shocked. And I was like, you guys sit together all the time. In fact, you guys outnumber us. But just because you see some brown and black guys sitting together, that's congregating? More power to them. Why not? But this was a brotherhood. They played sports together. They were, again, on a job, which actually leads me to another column that I wrote. It was called The Commodification of Sports. And it talked about how pretty much compared plantation life to professional and college sports. And because these folks were on such a different schedule, they had a separate culture. And there were certain things that they weren't exposed to that many of us were.
Right.
And so they were at a disadvantage, even though they were making money for the school. But then at the same time, they weren't making money for themselves until they might get drafted. So to say that these guys were congregating was just not seeing the entire context. What are they going to do? They're on the same schedule. That's who they know. Every once in a while, you see one that kind of, maybe dated somebody from a different race. And so you'd see them hanging out with some of the folks that weren't black. Nobody scoffed at that. And a lot of the black guys were dating white girls. You didn't see anybody balking at that. It was interesting come senior year because they kind of circled around and started looking for the black girls because mom and dad were coming to graduation and they wanted to have a black woman on their arm. I was keen to that, so turned down a lot of dates in the last semester of my senior year. But no, I don't think there was. The thing about reverse racism is a power construct. And if you don't have the power, you can't be racist because that's what it engages. So if you're othered, man, you're just othered. You're on the outside. Now, I do a lot of talking about privilege and how the centering of whiteness can involve the people who are othered, and often does. Because if you center whiteness as someone of color, you're part of the power structure. So you will see that there are black people, brown people, all sorts of people who are very bought in and will fight to make sure that that power center stays the way it is. So that's the only way that I see that black people, brown people, whoever, could participate in the power center. But I would not say that they had power. Most of them would agree they don't.
Interesting. Were you there in the days of Cornell Thomas and Darren Turner?
I remember. Cornell, yes. Darren, not so much. I don't remember Darren now. He married my soror, Deidre Turner. Rolly is what we called her. I made Rolly. Rolly was my little sister, and AKA. And I didn't get to know Darren until after she married him, and that was after I was well out of grad school. But Thomas, what was his name? Cornell. He was like the only black faculty member that I knew during that time. And I don't even think he was full-time. I'm not even sure. Yeah. And I think he dealt with the alphas on some level. I can't remember. But I'd only see him every once in a while.
Oh, okay. So you didn't interact with him quite often. Because he was telling us a story about speaking to the black students. So there was this gathering. And he comes and he looks at the people in the room and says, all of them are female. So he said, well, where are the guys? And so the girls say, well, most of those guys are athletes. And they're interested in dating white women. So we stuck here. And so when Cornell asked the guys, they say, well, why would we have drama when we can have this for free?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And of course, once they reach their senior year, they wise up. And, you know.
I only know one guy, Baraka was actually the only guy I knew that actually married white. But he's from California. He was always different. He came here different, you know. But most of these other guys were from East Texas, South, you know, the deep South, and
Yes.
came from blackety black, you know, homes and communities, and got a taste of something different. So it was very interesting to see.
Interesting indeed, especially knowing that miscegenation is you know, according to former Chancellor Sadler, one of the reason for delaying integration. They were really, that was the number one fear. And even, you know, the fact that Jennifer Gideon Brooks, she got a handshake.
Yeah.
Because there was no physical contact to be between people of different races.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing at play the very thing that they feared.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, we could go real deep with misogynoir and all of that.
Absolutely did.
Yeah. Gee, the brothers were doing it to us because they didn't see us sexually, but they saw white women that way. It's very interesting. But I knew a lot of black couples, you know. There were a couple that hung tough till graduation. You knew they were going to get married, you know. But they were in the minority. Yeah.
Very good. Well, I only have but a few other questions. Looking at, you know, more recently, TCU's reputation, especially 2018, 2020, between those times, TCU's reputation has been smudged among reports of racism, and, you know, the killing of George Floyd definitely triggered a lot of emotions. Do you think that these stories about TCU bring in more transparency as to what's really going on campus, behind the scenes? Or do you think that it distorts what our institution is really about?
You know, when I learned that you guys were doing this, I thought it made a ton of sense to at the very least, acknowledge the bad stories. Because I think, just like with anybody's marketing, you tend to see the highlights reel. The fact that it is okay for me to tell the story about homecoming. Nobody wanted to talk about that. They didn't want me to. I mean, my dad couldn't even get in the door to see Chancellor Tucker, right? So I don't think it distorts it. I think it rounds it out. It makes it more real. It gives it far more authenticity than it's had. Because even if you just look at the history of Fort Worth, let alone Fort Worth and Dallas, and all of the things that were going on in those places, you mean to tell me that TCU sat in the middle of it and there wasn't a problem with race at all? It's just not true. It's just not true. So I think this is a step in the right direction. Now, the word reconciliation for me means that you're not only going to go back, tell the stories, but you're going to try to do something to make something right. That's what reconciliation means to me. So I am very interested to see what happens next. But I also believe that actually coming to terms with the truth is the first step. National Geographic did something very similar. I don't know if you know about that. No? Okay. So they went back into their annals realizing that the way they did journalism was very racist.
Yes.
Is also sexist. It was a lot of things.
Yes, it was.
And what they did was they went back into their issues, and they pointed out where they were wrong.
Absolutely, yes.
And that was the first step to actually trying to move forward. I think you have to do it, and this is the only predominantly white institution that I know. Maybe there are others, maybe I'm just not aware, that are taking this, what someone would call a radical step, to actually record the stories of the voiceless. Because, I mean, honestly, I might have been on your billboards, but I hadn't told the story.
Yes, absolutely. Well, L. Michelle Smith, we are so grateful for you taking the time to share your stories with us, to voicing your perspective, because it has been omitted from our literature for far too long. And we are grateful for your words of wisdom and we truly appreciate you supporting the whole process.
Well, I appreciate you calling me, seeking me out to be able to share the stories. It's cathartic.
Yes.
It really is, and it's a healing process too.
Yes.
I can actually put this away.
Oh.
I know.
Thank you.